failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. This was a very famous quote by Benjamin Franklin. Often it's not related to Benjamin Franklin, but it is so important that when we do not plan, we fail. This is the start of the new year. So it is so important to be able to go, let's look at where do we start planning, what has worked in the past and what hasn't. So one of the things that I wanted to do was I actually wanted to talk a bit about how does planning work? Where do we start? What do we work on? And what bits do we leave out? And so as Bixina, this podcast, Grow Your Business, is really for business leaders and for business owners, I wanted to break up this particular podcast of planning for the new year in a couple of different sections. I want to talk about financial planning. I want to talk about people planning. I want to talk about emotional planning. And I also want to talk about mindset planning, because I believe that those 4 areas help us achieve a lot of the different things that it is that we're wanting to do. Now, it's also important that we want a comprehensive approach. We want to make sure that we plan that effectively. So let's, as a business leader and owner, look at your first part, which is financial planning. And I want to break this down into a number of areas as well. The first thing is I want to look at budgeting, forecasting. Let's have a look at your last year's financial performance and see what worked and what didn't. You've got a detailed budget for the year that's just gone for 23-24. And for those of you that run in years where you run the whole calendar year, this is also a great point to stop. You're 6 months into the year. You want to be able to have a look at whether you're on target, and hopefully you're doing those numbers monthly, if not weekly. But one of the things in this particular podcast is let's have a look at the final details, the essential details in terms of the performance. Where are you 6 months in or at the end of the year, depending on what cycle you're in? But let's create a really detailed budget for the next 6 months. We want to look at our revenue. We want to look at our expenses. Is there anything that it's going to be coming in? Is there anything we need to be coming out? And we specifically want to look at profit. And I'll talk about cash flow in a moment. We specifically in the first part want to look at what our gross profit is and what our net profit is. That's the first part. The second thing we want to be able to do is look at cash flow. I remember going to this amazing workshop by Alan Miltz, and I implemented everything, by the way, that Alan suggested, and it made my business and myself a lot of money. And he talked about the fact that it is so important, he talks about that revenue is insanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king or queen. And so cash flow management is so important to understand. That you want to understand your potential fluctuations that are coming into the business. You want to be able to have a bit of a reserve. I find that psychologically so wonderful to be able to know that there's some money sitting there in case for a rainy day, as they say, which absolutely is while I'm recording this particular podcast. The third part of our financial stuff is we actually want to look at our investments and growth. So where do we need to invest things in our business, but also where does some of this money that's perhaps that you've made, how are we investing that outside of the particular business as well? And when it comes to investing in the business, we need to look at things like, well, is there certain technology? I know so many companies are struggling with AI and how to implement that. I don't have all the answers for AI, but you want to be able to find somebody who's maybe a few steps ahead of you in the technology game and look at who we can hire to help us do that. It might be in your marketing. It may be a particular product line. It may be a particular service that you're wanting to introduce. So have a look at the next 6 to 12 months in terms of where it is that the money is going to need a bit of an injection, where it's going to need some investment from you as well. And the last part of financial planning that you want to look at is to really look at the costs. And you want to identify where can we actually reduce costs without compromising any quality. This is where innovative thinking comes in. This is where it's great to involve some of your team to say, if we wanted to, cut out 1%, 2% of our costs, what are some of the things that we can do without compromising quality? How can we get a little bit better or smarter or faster? How can we reduce our costs a little bit, tiny bit? And those 1% add up to a lot. So that's what I really wanted to cover in that first part of financial planning. And I know that I've skimmed over that. For some of you, you might be amazing at that, but not so good at the other parts. The next thing I want to speak about is people planning. It is so important as you plan out your next 6 to 12 months to plan for what you need. It is said that we underestimate what we're going to do in a year and overestimate what we're going to do in the next quarter. I do work with a number of clients around some of their planning processes, and I find this constantly to be the case. The teams that I work with overload their first quarter. They go, yep, we're going to get this done. Yes, we're going to get this done. Yes, 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 we're going to get this done. And then by the time they get to quarter 4, the month's 9 to month 12, they've under-resourced that. So when it comes to workforce planning for your people planning, it is really important to look at where your current team is. What are you growing, whether it's services and some of the financial planning we've just spoken about. Where have you got an oversupply of people that you need to move? Where have you got an undersupply of people? Can the people that are in oversupply move to the undersupply area? Do they have the skills and capabilities to do that? How are we going to plan for recruitment or training to make sure that we've got the right people in the right jobs doing the right work? You know, often we talk about right people and right jobs, but we also need them to be doing the right work. You know, I heard this great saying that effectiveness is working on the things that matter. That's what effectiveness is. So one of the things what we talk about here in workforce planning is we also want our team to be able to really, really work on, you know, what it is that they need to do. So yeah, critical to be able to make that particular part work. The second part of people planning is what I call people development or employee development, depending on the word that you use in your business. And this is looking at training. Now, it varies how many businesses, depending on the size of your business and what type of business you have that you invest, but you want to be investing a small percentage of the revenue, of what you pay them into their training. Why? Because when we encourage people to have continuous learning, when we get them to train and retrain, they become better at what they do. It also helps the ones that are looking for the career opportunities for us to be able to retain them, and making sure that you've got a training plan. Again, training plan very simply where we want them to be, where they are, knowing what the gap analysis is, and making sure that we've got that plan. Some businesses start to do so much training in May, June, if they end up with their fiscal year at the end of June because they've got money to spend. Not the best way to spend money. You want to be able to spread out the training. You want to make sure that it's effective. You want to make sure that you're measuring the impact of the training that you're having and people are actually utilizing that in their businesses. And the third part I want to talk about in people planning is the engagement and retention. Every business leader and owner is looking at how we can boost the employment, you know, in there. How do we do more things culturally? How do we have you know, give them more competitive benefits? How do we recognize that? Now, in my book, Getting Up People to Step Up, one of the chapters that I have is talking about how do we recruit, but also incentivize people based on their passions. Rather than give them incentives that we want in the business, how do we as business leaders and owners understand what it is that our people desire? And even if we've got a flat fee, like let's say it's $2,000 incentive that they're going to get, how do we tailor that to make it more specific? How do we tailor the presents that we give at certain cultural things or Christmas to be the same, not to be the same thing, and make that a little bit more alignment with people's passions? Because then we're truly recognizing and rewarding their achievements, but also personalizing it that says that it matters and I've done some planning on my people. Now, let me jump straight into emotional planning. What does that mean, emotional planning? It might not be a term that you've actually heard before. I want to talk about emotional planning and mental well-being, which is linked into your people. I'm a big believer that it's so important the businesses that are investing in their people around wellness programs and emotional planning are performing better. It's so important to have wellness programs, and those wellness programs might be that you might give 2 counselling sessions to your people, and then they've got access to manage their emotional well-being and emotional planning. You might have some wellness workshops that you actually hold within your business, and you have certain experts coming in, doing that either at lunchtime sessions, online sessions, face-to-face sessions, maybe have a combination of them. That again is helping your people manage their emotions and how they can do that better. Obviously, flexible work arrangements is not something I need to step into. Every business that wants to retain key talent has looked at that part and has got a plan in place. And if you don't, you must do that. The other thing around emotional planning is to look at things like how do we create as business leaders and owners a more supportive environment? How do we make our people feel valued? How do we encourage open communication? And often this is a culture of feedback. We actually want to have a lot more feedback in our businesses so people actually feel supported. They are actually looking at what they're doing really well and somebody's recognizing them for it. And also, if there's things that are not working well, somebody's pointing that out, talking about the improvement plan that they need, again, talking about the gaps that they need to fix. Those things, when people know what their supportive environment is around them, they know what the gaps are that they have to fill. Their emotional planning, their emotional management is so much better rather than going to a performance review, finding out that there's all these things that they're not measuring up to in the manager's eyes or point of view. And then they feel very, very disengaged. So one of the things we want to do is create that supportive environment and make sure that that happens. Now, in Australia, for those people that are listening to that, there has been some rules that have gone in that certain employers cannot contact their employees after a certain amount of time because we want to be able to give them a break. So a lot of people have talked about this for 20 or 30 years called work-life balance, but really all we're trying to say here is that it needs to be, you need to have some strategies in place to be able to manage your emotional planning. I know for me, there are periods that I go through, for example, writing this particular book. I got up super early so that I could run my full day and be able to write a book for 2 hours each morning. So I got up 2 hours earlier than my normal rise time, which meant I had to go to bed at least an hour and a half to 2 hours earlier every night. Wasn't much fun for the 6 months that I spent writing this particular book, getting your people to step up. But whatever it is, it's important to be able to manage that. And so from an emotional planning perspective, it's so important. I come across so many people that are saying, Shivani, even though I'm working from home 2 days a week and in the office the other 3 days a week, or whatever combination you have, I hardly ever get to take breaks anymore. Part of your balance is, as a business leader and owner, is to encourage our people to take breaks, is encourage them to have some stand-up desks time, is encourage them to have a timer on 45 to 50 minutes and go for a stretch, get hydrated, go to the toilet. Don't, burn out. Make sure if you've got lots of leave accumulated, you use that. And there are some of the strategies and practices that can be put into place from a business leader and owner perspective to be able to have more emotional planning in your next 6 to 12 months for your year ahead. And the last thing I want to talk about, and I know a lot of people speak about this, is mindset planning. Now, mindset planning is really, as a business leader and owner, you've got to really look at the last 12 months and go, okay, or the last 6 months and go, how did it work? What was my mindset like? Look, I was so positive. It was great. Well, then how do I continue that for the next 6 or 12 months? Or, wow, I had so much on. I found myself in negative spaces all the time as a business leader and owner. Well, great. Let me take stock of that. Let me then work out what are the goals that I want to achieve around my mindset. How am I going to break these goals down, both professional as well as personal? So in my business as well as for me. What are some of the things that I'm going to do to track it? What are some of the rituals that I need to have for positive mindset? And if somebody ever asks me and they say, look, Shivani, what would you suggest to people to manage their mindset, or what do you do to manage a positive mindset? One of the key things I do every day is I journal. I journal for 10 minutes. I use it as part of my mindset planning. I write things in there that are upsetting me. I write things in there that are my goals. I make sure that there's things in there. And the other thing I want to do around mindset is I constantly want to, as a business leader and owner, constantly want to grow. I want to grow my leadership development. I want to grow my own personal development. So what do I need to do? I need to make sure that I've got a coach. I do a lot of coaching for other business leaders and owners, but I too need that. So I've got people around me that support me, that are my sounding boards. I attend workshops. I go to learning days. I make sure that I'm aware of industry trends and practices to make sure that I keep my mindset positive as well. And so to wrap some of that up, I just want to talk about implementation. That's all very well and good that we're speaking about planning for the next 6 to 12 months ahead, but it's also so important to review things and implement them. I'm a big one for action plans. So whether it's 6 months or 12 months, I like breaking it down into quarters. So I've got a 90-day plan, my big rocks that you want to achieve in the next 90 days. I then want to break that down into weekly goals. What are my weekly goals? And then I want to break that into my daily goals in terms of what is it that I need to do on a daily basis, but I'm not starting with daily, I'm starting with yearly into quarterly and working backwards into weekly and then into daily. So I want to have an action plan. I've got two whiteboards sitting here next to me. I know what my 12-month plans are, which are stuck up on my whiteboard. I've got my quarterly 90-day plans, and then I break them into weeks, and then I break them into days and cross things off as I go. The other thing I want to do is I want to review them. So I usually try and review them at the end of the week. How did I go for that week? Set the goals for the next week on the end of the week, where even sometimes it's a Thursday if I'm traveling on a Friday, but I know what I'm focused on for the next week. So you want to be able to do that. So I want you to look at, through this podcast, some of the things that you go, oh, Shivani, I already do that really well. That is awesome that you do that well. Keep doing those things. But perhaps there's some of the things that I've spoken about or broken up the way, as I said, some people don't go, that's a really strange way to actually break up people planning and emotional planning. Absolutely. But you need to be able to do that when it comes to managing people and growing your business. The podcast is all called Growing Your Business. I'd love for you to be able to check out the book, Getting Your People to Step Up, which is now on sale through my website on the books page. And that will take you through to Amazon and they'll have that delivered to you. Would love to see how you can implement some of these strategies into your business to help you and your business grow, to plan for where you want to be, and ensuring that putting actions and steps in place in order to be able to achieve it. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Grow Your Business podcast. I hope you got one idea that you can think about or perhaps even implement straight away in your business. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under Ask Shivani. Remember, I call it Ask Shivani, so please send me your questions that I can address in this podcast for you. And I would also so appreciate if you went to the Apple Podcast to rate and review this podcast.